Hello, I just wanted to get on here and pot up all my plants from PlantCon with you guys. Some of them are imports, and some of them are established little plants. So, depending on what the plant is and how the root system looks, will depend on how I pot it up and what medium I use. Right now, I have sphagnum moss and perlite. This devil was already in moss and I could see the roots through the moss, so I went ahead and kept most of that moss on there. I also wanted to talk about what I did when I first brought these home. The ones that were bone dry, I did let them soak in water for quite a few hours, almost overnight, and then I sprayed them to treat them for any pests with my homemade spray, which is just Castile soap, alcohol, and peroxide. After they dried, that's when I came over to start potting them up. This devil, again, it had a really good root system. I could see the roots on the outside of the moss, so I kept most of that and I just potted up in moss and perlite. The next plant I'm going to pot up is a Scindiapsis mariposa. I might not be saying that right, but as you can see, many of these were grown roots, and you can tell that there was just moss placed around the roots so that it didn't grow in that moss, like how the devils, you could tell they had grown in that moss. As you can see here, it's the root system. It is very small. That's why I'm using such a small container, and I'm doing the moss and perlite again. And I am using a clear pot and cutting drainage holes in the bottom so that you can monitor the roots on it. This next one is a philodendron pink Atab, Hope, Ponesia. Yeah, I'm never going to say that right, so I just call it Atab. When I started to unwrap this, I noticed the moss was extremely dry, so I wasn't going to try to rip it off. I just do not like to mess with the roots a lot, so if all the moss falls off, then it all falls off. If it stays on there, then I will keep some of the moss on there. So I'm getting a tiny cup to pot it up in, not too big for the root system, and using moss and perlite again, cutting drainage holes in it. I will put these in my IKEA cabinet for high humidity so they can grow good root system. And here's my philodendron caramel marble, and this one had root rot and I had to cut it off. It was the tiniest bit after that, and then I got some peroxide to soak it in water and peroxide before I tried to pot it up. It was already in soil, really chunky soil, so I think that's what caused it. It didn't really have a big enough root system for me. I like mine to have a good root system before I put it in soil. After that soaks in the peroxide for a little bit, I will come back and pot it up for you and finish potting up the rest of them. Let's talk about root rot and what to do with it and how to take care of it. So I got this little philodendron caramel marble from PlantCon in Chicago over this past weekend, and the whole pot was full of soil, really wet soil, and there was like no roots left. I think the plant was a little too small to even be put in that big of a pot or in soil. I like to wait until mine has a good root system before I switch over to soil. So I'm soaking it in peroxide and water, about half and half, for about 30 minutes. And this is after I cut off all of the dead and rotted roots. So there was only one little root left after that. Let it soak for a little bit, and then I rinse it off. And now I'm going to pot it up in some sphagnum moss and perlite. I'm using a very small cup. You don't want it to be too big. With how small the root system is, you can tell this was a tissue culture, so it still needs to grow more roots and get more established. And the only roots that should be left should be extremely firm roots, usually white. Anything that's brown or mushy or soft, all that needs to be cut off before you put it in the peroxide. Then just gently fill the cup up with the moss and perlite. Make sure that you cut holes in the bottom of the cup too if it doesn't already have drainage holes. And I am going to put mine in my IKEA cabinet for the high humidity. If you do not have an IKEA cabinet, a prop box, or the cups with the dome lids, anything like that would work real good. It just needs a high humidity so it can grow a better root system. And I will check on it weekly to make sure that the moss is still a little moist and to make sure that the roots are growing and there's no more root rot. This is part 3 of me potting up the rest of my plants I got from PlantCon Chicago. This is my philodendron strawberry caramel marble. First, I'm going to remove all the plastic and the tape from around it and then take it out of the pot to actually see if it is rooted into the moss. Most of the time it's not. You can see here, it's literally just roots with moss wrapped around the outside of them. This one actually has a pretty good root system on it, as you can see. I kind of just let the moss fall off. I try not to mess with the roots a bunch. Like, you don't want to manhandle them and be all rough. Um, that's just going to put it in more shock. The plant is already going through enough stress after being shipped to PlantCon, being there all weekend, everybody playing with the plants. So, yeah, I just let whatever moss fall off, and whatever wants to stay, I leave it on there. And then I'm going to pot it up in sphagnum moss and perlite. And I will put all these plants in my IKEA cabinet. You just want them to be somewhere with higher humidity so they can get established and rooted into the pot that you put them in. So I fill the rest of the pot up with the moss and the perlite, and then kind of just push it, make sure it's snug in there. And that's about it. Most of these I will all put in moss, especially if they are already in moss or if they don't have a good root system. Moss and perlite are my go-to. This next one is the gold black velvet and alocasia. Go ahead and cut the plastic off. This one is in moss too, and it's pretty much the same as the strawberry caramel marble. It is just laid in the middle with moss around it. This root system is way too small for that cup. And so I'm just going to put it in a smaller cup, fill it in with the perlite and the moss, kind of push it all down, and it's good to go. This last one is my Anthurium Carla Blackier self, and I'm just going to cut the plastic off. This one's the same way. It was just laid in the moss. The moss just fell off. It has a really good root system. I'm going to find a cup that fits its root system and then just fill it in with the moss and perlite and put it in my cabinet. Make sure these cups have drainage holes, and you just want to make sure you check them weekly to make sure the moss is still a little wet, and just monitor the roots. And you're good to go. This is part 4 of me potting up my plants from PlantCon. I cannot believe it's taken me this many videos to pot up all these babies. But let's get into it. This is my begonia pink maculata. I am potting it up in sphagnum moss and perlite. It had a small root system, so I'm just potting it up in a small clear cup so I can monitor the roots. I will put it in my IKEA cabinet next for the high humidity. Next, I'm going to pot up my Hoya Bella outer variegated. I'm taking the plastic off. It had a small root system with moss just laid around it. When you're potting something up this small with the root ball so small, you just want the pot to be a tiny bit bigger than the root ball. So it should look like this. And then I'm just going to sit it in the cup and fill it in with moss and perlite. And I will keep this one in my IKEA cabinet until I can see a good root system through the clear pot that I potted it up in. And the last plant that I was going to do was going to be my Freckles Pep, but it's in soil, and so I want to keep it in soil and repot it into soil. So I figured I would save that for another video.